Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I've said this a lot in my last couple of videos and probably sound like a broken record at this point, but the early 2000s was truly a special time in gaming. The PS2 conquered the known world and endless titles were released across the globe, so much that people still play it to this day, especially with all the ways to play on the PS2 console by backing up your games to a hard drive, soft modding the console, upscaling graphic options, etc. Emulation has also opened the door to keep these classics alive. This is the case for Xbox Original and GameCube as well, who are also relics in their own right. I always find it interesting that gamers today still play or prefer retro or older titles, even with all that there is to offer with the so-called AAA or quadruple A gaming and what they have to show for. Simply put, we had exclusives on those consoles that in some cases can't and won't even be matched to today's standard. The introduction into the following generation of consoles, in this case the 7th gen, was also a crazy time in gaming. Playing Xbox Live or PS Network with your lads across the world, accessible 4-player co-ops, and online gaming popped up for Xbox 360 and PS3 alike. And it was next level for console gaming. A shift happened in gaming during this time. Companies started to put more focus towards online services. This wasn't a huge priority for the previous generation. Instead, it was just quality games and experiences. Some companies adopted well, and some struggled to find their footing. The gaming company Koei, today known as Koei Tecmo, was in this category of companies struggling with adapting to a changing gaming client. Not in the sense that they didn't fit into the online space for gaming, their games weren't tailored for that specific market. Koei instead was signing publishing deals with Microsoft and Sony and needed to have available ports ready for the release of the PS3 and the Xbox 360. In turn, the adaptation to a new console was a challenge for them in a sense, especially when you consider the route Koei took and the vision they had for their 6th Dynasty Warriors game, which was essentially a reboot to the series. A game that in its entirety is often displaced, overlooked, and quite frankly frowned upon in large parts of the Dynasty Warriors community. But why? In this video, we will take a brief look into one of the most misunderstood and controversial Dynasty Warriors games ever produced. The release of Dynasty Warriors 6 in North America was met with mixed reviews and criticism. The game's roster cut had fans and critics alike puzzled. Why add characters to the last 3 games only to remove them? Could this be the first real taste of what Koei had in store for future Warriors titles? In hindsight, it appears it was. Koei had it in store exactly, but not in the ways that you think. Although there was a small cut of rosters from Dynasty Warriors 3 to Dynasty Warriors 4, with the removal of Fushi and Nuwa, it doesn't seem as controversial to me since the removed characters didn't have a kingdom to represent and weren't really given story modes to begin with. This wasn't the case for Dynasty Warriors 6. The confusion continued when Koei back-released the game to PS2 later that year in the fall of 2008. This came after further market research went into the activity on the newer gen consoles. Koei quickly realized most gamers hadn't upgraded to the 7th gen consoles yet, and were happily enjoying the PS2. In turn, the game received a PC port as well as a PS2 port, titled Dynasty Warriors 6 Special in North America and Shinsenzoku Musou 5 in Japan. Shockingly, this port had more content than its next-gen counterpart, which featured 5 additional stories for certain characters that were only playable in free mode on the 7th gen consoles, causing even more discord among fans as to why this was the decision Koei went with. Ultimately, the game experienced slowdowns and excessive load times on the PS2, mainly due to the fact that the engine it was created for was on a next-gen console, which meant the PS2 disc was dual-layered, causing some PS2s to not be able to read the disc entirely. This usually didn't occur with the slim PS2s, but was just predicated on the quality of your PS2 laser reading disc. The success of Dynasty Warriors games on PS2 was enough reason alone for fans not to rush to get the PS3 and Xbox 360. Maybe for other reasons, when games and live lobbies were beginning to heat up, the hopes of experiencing Dynasty Warriors on the next gen just wasn't incentivized enough for the average Dynasty Warriors fan. especially when you consider the Extreme Legend expansions that raised the bar in gameplay experience and replayability by achieving difficult weapons and items. Personally, this alone was reason for me to skip out on Dynasty Warriors 6 at the time of its release. The lack of consistency that I loved on PS2 era didn't resonate with 12-year-old me who just wanted to button mash my ironclad thumbs on a DualShock 2 controller. Though 6 was a decent entry to the series, with revamped character models, weapons, amazing new visuals, and a stellar soundtrack, it wasn't what fans were expecting or wanting, even on newer generation of consoles. Roster cuts felt like a cop-out by enhancing quote-unquote the combat mechanics with the implementation of the Rimbu system, a simplistic and linear approach to combat that featured a loop of normal attacks to build up your Rimbu bar for an ultimate Rimbu rage that significantly enhanced your abilities. It's important to note that since Dynasty Warriors 6, Koei has been increasing the character count to a total of 94 as of the release of Dynasty Warriors 9 back in 2019. But for me personally, it doesn't seem to make any difference in gameplay experience since characters all share weapons and no one carries uniqueness in combat outside of their special attack. This is the case for Dynasty Warriors 7, Dynasty Warriors 8, and Dynasty Warriors 9, and most recently in Samurai Warriors 5, just in a different manner with clones instead of weapon swapping. Although you can still weapon swap in Samurai Warriors 5. Bruh! I can see the comparison between Dynasty Warriors 6 and Samurai Warriors 5, in that the roster cut seems harsh and unexpected, but the main difference is the combat system used for each game. Koei really took a leap of faith with the Rimbu style, which changed the way you played the game entirely, whereas Samurai Warriors 5 kept the same type of combat mechanics, just tweaked slightly to be better in my opinion, from the previous Samurai Warriors games. But of course, the clone movesets and limited use of weapons really set the game back. Despite the criticism surrounding it, I have a newfound appreciation for Dynasty Warriors 6 today. I've matured since my knucklehead days and believe in giving certain things a fair chance, something I never gave Dynasty Warriors 6. Going back to this game took some patience, however. I hate making progress on the 360 version or PS3, only to see my progress not carry over to the special version on PS2. I only really play the special version on the PS2 to access the additional story modes that came with that version. Staying on the topic of story, I thought this game was visually stunning for its time, and arguably the best personality these characters had been given compared to any prior Dynasty Warriors release. The story took an approach similar to Dynasty Warriors 5, where you follow the path of the chosen warrior, but you got a better understanding of the intricacies and dynamics with how the character fit into the kingdom they served. As I previously mentioned, the approach reminds me of Samurai Warriors 5 and how Koei took a leap of faith in what the previous games offered and went with something new and reimagined. We can argue at length whether this was a good or bad move, but as I gain experience in the real world, it's important to note that you have to take the product you buy as a consumer at face value. No one is forcing us to buy the game. We took a leap of faith as a customer, knowing you could potentially hate the game or despise it for what it tried to do. The more I understand this as a consumer, the more I get a sense of how to approach these random, quote unquote, who asked for this or bizarre ideas from companies, not only in the gaming industry, of course, but in just business in general. I find correlations in modern business today, studying the rise and fall of Dynasty Warriors 6. It's important to understand the current state of gaming industries before getting too in-depth. These ambitious and costly moves by gaming studios that seem like a good idea end up being too drastic in scope, unfortunately missing the mark with what fans are looking for, which is usually just a quality experience that is worth the time and money. I'm talking quality in terms of improvements to the game that enhance the experience, but doesn't change the identity too much. There are instances when drastic elements need to be implemented, but that's speculative in terms of what your approach to your fan base is. Or simply put, that's just part of being a smart business, while also knowing your audience and consumer above all else, because at the end of the day, they determine your success. One thing we can learn from this brief study of Dynasty Warriors 6 was that Koei listened to the fans' feedback, made the necessary changes to bring back what their fans desire, and made a stellar response with the following entry for Dynasty Warriors 7. Despite the negative reception in the West, Koei continued to press on with Dynasty Warriors 6, took the positive feedback from the Japanese market, and ran with it. Maybe they just really wanted it to be good. I'm not too sure. But the Empire's release was a good bounce back, in my opinion. Koei revamped the Empire system entirely and kept most of the implementations in that Empire's entry up until Dynasty Warriors 7, 8, and parts of 9 Empires. Both Dynasty Warriors 6 and Dynasty Warriors 6 Empires are still enjoyable today if you just give them a try for what they are. Instead of getting caught in the comparison trap of what other Dynasty Warriors games are, which can be difficult, I understand, for some, considering how many games there are in the series. The bigger question I have is this: will Koei take the feedback and criticism from Dynasty Warriors 9 and make necessary changes to the game for its 10th installment? That's even if we get a 10th Dynasty Warriors game anytime soon. Because although given the green light by Koei, it hasn't been confirmed fully, and we're already passing Q1 of 2024 at the making of this video. As discussed in my previous Warriors videos, Koei isn't banking on Warriors games to carry the company towards success. Koei is still doing well for themselves, and I don't think they will slow down anytime soon. In conclusion, I believe the black sheep of the Dynasty Warriors games is subjective in term, meaning not everyone hated Dynasty Warriors 6, and I don't blame them for that, whether they do or don't. It carries its own identity, which is separate from any Dynasty Warriors title. What we can learn is that the purchasing power and satisfaction of your customer matters, and Koei would be negligent to not take the proper feedback from some of their more questionable releases, especially as of late. I believe there's potential for Dynasty Warriors moving forward, but I'm starting to believe there might be more potential for spin-off IPs that rally faithful crowds and fans to experience their beloved anime or fandom series. Pirate Warriors, Hyrule, Fire Emblem, to name a few, that ended up being great games outside of the realm of Dynasty Warriors fan bases. With that, I sincerely appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this take on the pariah of Dynasty Warriors games. Will Dynasty Warriors 9 surpass the demise and shame Dynasty Warriors 6 received from critics and fans? Too early to tell perhaps, but let me know in the comments. Again, thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.